Mayor DeSousa, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, I cannot tell you what a special opportunity this is for me. I could not be more delighted to be here. Delighted, first of all, to be in this place, Ville-Saint-Laurent, part of Montreal, which means so much to me. I grew up not far from here, and I can tell you it was a wonderful place to grow up, with a real sense of community. I am also a proud alumnus of Vanier College. This school's wonderful teachers helped to shape and guide me, as I know they shaped and guided so many of you. No less importantly, I am delighted by the purpose of this gathering, which not only marks the 25th anniversary of the Vanier Symposium, but highlights the college's endorsement of the Watershed Never Again Declaration. As a board member of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, I am acutely aware of the need for advocacy to constantly renew our collective pledge to work to create a world where tolerance and mutual understanding prevail over injustice, distrust, fear, and those who cynically aid and abet those destructive impulses. Finally, I am delighted and humbled to be given the opportunity to work in common cause with a particular person, Irwin Cotler. I could read off his amazing biography, his stellar education, his exemplary service as a member of Parliament from 1999 to 2015, representing Mount Royal, his extraordinary tenure as Minister of Justice and Attorney General, and of course his founding of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. But undoubtedly, you knew all of that. I would instead like to speak about Irwin Cotler on a very personal level, beyond all of his well-deserved accolades and honors, including being named to the Order of Canada. He is above all a kind, generous, and humble man. In my own life, I have been fortunate enough to have had 2 or 3 individuals who have taken the time and had the patience to help guide and instruct me. The most important was a professor when I was at McGill Law School, yes, Irwin Cotler. I was very young, and he was already renowned and universally respected, but he did not hesitate to be generous with his time and advice. In the decades since, he has been a constant source of wise counsel and true inspiration. This made me realize that no matter how busy one is or how exalted one's position, there should always be time set aside to give back. So that is how I would like to introduce a man who was my teacher and mentor, a person I now count as a friend, and who is indeed a friend to all those who seek justice and fairness in Canada and throughout the world. I give you Irwin Cotler.
Thank you, Jay. I'm delighted that I'm up here in a panel with Jay and Alan DeSousa. At least those are 2 faces you haven't seen during the conference. I'm, at this point, on the precipice of becoming boring and a burden. But fortunately, I'm going to be sharing with you the contents of the Never Again Declaration, which I'll do in a moment. But I just want to say with regard to Jay Rosenzweig, because it may not be all that well known. He didn't mention that for us, he's an inspiring member of our Raoul Wallenberg board, and that I mentioned now that he was the best of my students. But Jay, as a law student, was writing then, and his papers then were on the subjects of justice and accountability. In other words, the very themes of this conference were already the subject matter of his papers and were already in his consciousness and his prospective advocacy at the time. And more recently, he issued yet again his annual report on women and in positions of corporate leadership and the need for the empowerment of women to bring about gender equity and gender equality in the boardrooms of the nation. and this report has been heralded not only in Canada but internationally. It's become a template for how to empower women leadership and do so in a way that they are at the forefront, not only in the corporate boards but also in the general political and other decision-making bodies of our country. So, Jay, we owe you really a debt of gratitude for that annual and inspired report. Let me turn now to the Never Again Declaration. This generation grew out of a conference held a little less than a year ago at Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. The conference, the symposium, was titled the Double Entendre of Nuremberg, the Nuremberg of hate and the Nuremberg of judgments. It was taking place then on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the Nuremberg race laws, the state-sanctioned incitement to hate which became precursor and prologue to the Holocaust, and on the 70th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials, which became the foundation for the development of what has come to be known as international human rights, humanitarian, and criminal law. And so, at the conclusion of that conference, which had a Supreme Court judges panel, which included Justice Rosie Abella from our own Supreme Court, which had a Justice Ministers panel, which included Luis Moreno Ocampo, the first special prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, and which had a scholars panel, which included leading scholars and academicians like Professor Alan Dershowitz. The assembly there of scholars and judges and lawyers and survivors and the like, and one of the most moving pieces of that conference was the survivor testimony, unanimously adopted the following declaration. I'm only going to read excerpts from it. It's interesting how it dovetails with, if not reaffirms, what have been the lessons of the last 2 days. From the preamble, I'm just going to excerpt from the preamble where it says, whereas genocide is the most insidious and destructive threat known to humankind, the ultimate crime against humanity, a horrific and unspeakable act whereby state-sanctioned incitement transformed hatred into catastrophe. And then continuing in the preamble, whereas the 20th century, which adopted the Genocide Convention and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was also, and this was the theme of our remarks the last 2 days, was also the century of multiple preventable genocides and mass atrocities, continuing also into the 21st century. And though it doesn't mention this, it incorporates by reference, in effect, what have been the genocides in the 21st century. I'm referring also to, and which have been discussed here, Darfur, Syria, the terrible genocide of the Yazidi, and of course the reference that was made to the Roma situation that was part of the 20th century but has yet gone unaddressed in this context. Whereas indifference and inaction have led to such mass atrocities and genocides. Whereas the danger of genocide and mass atrocity shall never cease unless the lessons of genocides past are both heeded, and the important words, and acted upon. We, parliamentarians, political leaders, and representatives of civil society from around the world, hereby affirm. And now I'm going to summarize the lessons affirmed in this declaration, which, as I say, dovetail with what we have been hearing during this conference. One, the danger of forgetting, le devoir de mémoire, the imperative of remembrance, that mass murder is not a matter of abstract statistics. Unto each person there is a name, each person has an identity, each person is a universe. Whoever saves a single life, it is as if he saved an entire universe. Whoever kills a single person, it is as if he murdered an entire universe. And so the first lesson is the one that we have to take home with us. And that's the lesson I close. And so the abiding imperative which we must imbibe and act upon, we are each, wherever we are, the guarantors of each other's destiny. The second lesson, the danger of state-sanctioned incitement to hate and genocide, the responsibility to prevent. And I'll just excerpt from it. Incitement to genocide is not merely a warning sign of preventable tragedy. It is itself an international crime prohibited in the Genocide Convention. We have a responsibility to recognize, address, and redress this crime against humanity. The third, the danger of anti-Semitism, the responsibility to combat the oldest and most enduring of hatreds. And as has been said in this conference and as mentioned here, as we have learned only too well, while it begins with Jews, it does not end with Jews. We have a responsibility to prevent and combat this insidious hatred. Number four, the danger of Holocaust denial, the responsibility to repudiate false witness, the ultimate Orwellian inversion. The Holocaust denial movement whitewashes the crimes of the Nazis as it excoriates, quote unquote, the crimes of the Jews. And we have talked here in this conference about the dangers of genocide denial, be it also the denial of the genocide of the Tutsis, and that we have a responsibility to unmask the bearers of false witness. Number five, fifth lesson, the perils of indifference and inaction in the face of mass atrocity and genocide, the responsibility to protect. For indifference and inaction, and this was cited from Elie Wiesel, always means coming down on the side of the victimizer, never on the side of the victim. And then the important part of all this, that what makes the genocides in Rwanda and Darfur so unspeakable is not only the horror of the genocides, which are horrific enough, but that these genocides were preventable. The international community cannot be bystanders to such horror. We must act. Number six, the danger of impunity, the responsibility to bring war criminals to justice. Impunity only emboldens and encourages the war criminals and the war crimes. Number seven, the danger of la trahison d'éclair, the betrayal of the elites, the responsibility to speak truth to power. The Holocaust was made possible not only because of the bureaucratization of genocide, but because of the complicity of the elites, doctors, lawyers, judges, educators, faith leaders, engineers, architects, and the like. Number eight, the danger of assaults on the vulnerable and powerless, the responsibility to intervene. That it is our responsibility to give voice to the voiceless, to empower the powerless. Indeed, it is revealing that amongst the first group targeted for killing were the Jewish disabled, reminding us yet again of the need to prevent and combat injustice. Number nine, the danger of violence against women, the responsibility to prevent and protect. Simply put, significant numbers of the world's population are routinely subject to rape, assault, torture, starvation, humiliation, mutilation, and even murder simply because they are female. And so 70 years after the Holocaust, this lesson remains to be learned and acted upon, whether we speak of the horrific crimes against women in the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Syria or elsewhere. Number 10, the danger of mass atrocities against children, the responsibility to prevent and protect. That we have yet to learn from this most horrific of horrors, let alone act upon it. Millions of children the world over continue to be subjected to arbitrary detention, torture, enslavement, cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment and punishment, execution, and recruitment as quote-unquote child soldiers incited to terrorize and kill others. Number 11, the danger of the bystander community, the responsibility to remember and pay tribute to the rescuers, the righteous among the nations, of whom the Swedish non-Jew Raoul Wallenberg, characterized as the greatest humanitarian of the 20th century, is metaphor and message. Raoul Wallenberg demonstrated how one person with the compassion to care and the courage to act can confront evil and transform history. Number 12, the imperative to respect the legacy of the survivors of the Holocaust and other genocides, the legacy of light that emerges from the darkest of hatred. We must remember and honor the survivors of the Holocaust and other genocides, the true heroes of humanity, for they witnessed and endured the worst of inhumanity, but somehow found in the depths of their own humanity the courage to go on to rebuild their lives as they helped build our communities. And the declaration closes with the following words, which I leave to you and for us to internalize and act upon. And the words are as follows: we remember and pledge. Never again will we be indifferent to incitement and hate. Never again will we be silent in the face of evil. Never again will we indulge racism and anti-Semitism. Never again will we ignore the plight of the vulnerable. And never again will we be indifferent in the face of mass atrocity and impunity. We will speak up and act against indifference, against racism, against hate, against anti-Semitism, against mass atrocity, against injustice, and against the crime of crimes whose name we should even shudder to mention: genocide. Declared and adopted at the International Legal Symposium at Jagiellonian University in Poland on the double entendre of Nuremberg, the Nuremberg of hate and the Nuremberg of justice, May 4th, 2016, and reaffirmed here at this Conference on Justice and Accountability today. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's a hard act to follow, Professor Cotler, but I do want to say thank you for the invitation, and great to be on the same panel as Professor Cotler. Jay, to everyone who was here, thank you very much for the invitation. I realize in baseball terms, I'm the last batter in the lineup. So not that I'm going to be the last out, but the last batter. And I just want to take the time to thank the organizers of the conference here today on justice and responsibility to have invited me here to be a participant at the end of this time on what I think is a very important event. Last November, my community in Saint Laurent and myself joined as supporters of this event, and it's amazing how fast this event, Marlene, congratulations on what you've done to make it happen. And I am very, very thankful. And I'm very, very thankful to be able to be associated with such an important event. Throughout the last 2 days that were packed to the brim with thoughts and ideas and things that had to be said, I think we've had the privilege and the opportunity to hear well thought out analysis, more than just statements of principle, but basically things that are pertinent and relevant of subjects that are today important elements and important discussion items. And I want to raise my hat to Vanier College, because the institution of Vanier College had played such an important role in our community, had the leadership foresight to be able to get involved and to recognize this 25 years and to put its money where its mouth is to actually organize it and to make sure it actually happens. So thank you, Vanier, for playing that leadership role in our community. More than ever, the themes of justice, the themes of social responsibility, inclusion, the fight against discrimination are subjects of the day and the world that we live in day by day. We see the media reminds us often of our responsibilities with regard to our country, responsibilities in terms of whichever organization we're part of, but also our responsibilities as individuals. And we live at a time where to plead ignorance is just not acceptable nor excusable. It's impossible for us to close our eyes, impossible for us to pretend that these problems just don't exist, that they're happening somewhere else, and even sometimes when they're happening just in our own backyard. And I think the media also relays us in this time of real time, time after time on the international scene, what they see. And they hold up to us a mirror that we try to look in terms of what the reflection is. And the questions we have to ask ourselves is, are we at ease with what we see in the mirror? Can we continue to ignore the injustices, the inequities that are happening all around us and sometimes even in our own communities? And if the response is no to that, then how can we intervene? What's the fine line between help and interference? I don't think these are easy questions to answer. They're delicate questions that the panels time and time again have brought up and have been hopefully being able to guide us as we use those as points of reference as we make our day decisions, but also the deciders, the people who are making decisions in our communities and our countries make these decisions. I can speak as Mayor of Saint Laurent, and I can only say how glad I am that we have this opportunity to take the step back and to reflect and to remember. If we don't do that, we not only do our communities a disservice, but we're not true to ourselves as individuals. We have a large population that I'm sure you all know come from all walks of life and from all over the world. 81% of the people who live in our community were born outside Canada, who has a parent who was born outside Canada. And so if anyone is sensitive to these sensitivities, well, let me say that we are. Because day by day, whenever something's happening across the world, the media brings it into the living rooms of people who live in Saint Laurent, and they see it live on the screens. They feel the same emotions. They see the pain and the anguish happening there, and it affects the social tissue and the fabric and how people feel in our community, even though these are happening, thousands of kilometers away. Since our foundation in Saint Laurent, our population has always been open. We've opened our arms to welcome people from all over the world. The numerous waves of immigration, the numerous events that happened worldwide, the numerous refugees that came back here and found safe and security and a safe haven in our community. And many of these communities come from communities that were victims of persecution, of genocides, and also of the Holocaust. The question has to be asked, is this large diversity of many pathways and many origins, does thus give our community a better respect, a more sensitive respect for the differences that we have, for this harmony that we have currently among religions that characterizes our community? Or is it also the action of ongoing work that we try to do on a day-by-day basis that makes this notion of peace and harmony something that is valued in our community and allows us to do? I would suggest that both hypotheses reign true. Both hypotheses play a role. Where people come from gives them the understanding of how to be, of the values that are important to understand, but also what they experience here and the local leadership and the leadership that we have also play a large part to make sure that these things are not forgotten, isolated, and kept aside. This openness to individual rights, this openness to the values that are important, we try to emphasize regularly to make sure that these are reinforced, and events like today can only help make that happen for us. So it's an ongoing process. It's always a work in progress. It's not something that could be taken for granted. It's important for us to remember, and history has too often, unfortunately, showed us that people forget. And that's why these conflicts, which could occur many times over the world, are often the result of people not remembering. We have to make sure that we preserve that ability to remember and those references where people can hark back to allow them to remember even though times change. The workshops, the tables, the round tables, the exchanges that you've been part of over the last 2 days have not, and I don't think can be, envisioned to bring solutions to everything and all the problems of our times. But it's clear that it gives us a time to reflect. It gives us a chance to nourish our reflections among the decision makers, among the students, among the people who have taken the time to be here. And it gives us that reflection to also think about what happens in our day-by-day lives, because this is not something that happens that's a one-off. It's something that happens on a day-by-day basis, that these thoughts have to be nourished, cultivated, and encouraged, not just in our institutions, but in our families, in our neighborhoods, among the people who make part of our community, all the way down to each and every one of us. So the witnesses, the stuff that we heard today brings us not only a renewed sensibility to our choices in our decisions, but I must say also that it also harks to the work that has begun. I think each and every one of us de facto becomes advocates for social justice, advocates for social responsibility. And that's why I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank the guests. I want to thank the people who participated in large numbers over here today for helping us along this way to become these advocates that hopefully as we move out of here into our weekend, into the day-by-day routine that takes us away from it, that we retain parts of this and helps us become the advocates that the people in the conference would have wished for. Thanks again. Thank you very much for all the time and the people who have taken the time to stay all the way to the end. I think we thank all the people involved, and I want to say how proud I am to be able to bat cleanup. Thank you.